I would go through different phases of trying to fit in. Maybe now looking back on it, I realize I kind of was trying to be white, but that's because that's what was offered to me. It was the only thing I saw around me.
Hi, I'm Gracie Mercedes, and welcome back to Not Blank Enough, a podcast about everyday insecurities and triumphs. In this episode, I'm talking with Christiana Hooks. The television producer and director talks about what it was like to grow up Black in predominantly white spaces, how she never felt welcomed in the blogging community, we do a little gossiping about that, and much, much more. I hope you enjoyed this intimate conversation we titled, Not White Enough. Hello, Christy.
Hi.
Welcome to Not Blank Enough.
Thank you.
You're so cute. I'm so excited to have you. We're actually looking at each other because not all interviews do we look at each other. Sometimes we turn off the video of the Zoom, but I wanted to see your cute face.
We have to see each other.
So I usually start by talking about how we know each other, and I feel like we met through blogging, yes?
We met before that. I mean, my goodness, we met probably about 20 years ago through Naomi, through a mutual friend. But I mean, briefly. And then, then we reconnected through blogging probably now about 7 years ago.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh my God.
Time. What is time?
What is
a long time ago. Yes.
A long time ago. And that for you was only kind of like a little like side hustle because you are a full-time producer.
Yes. I started blogging because I felt the images I was seeing on other blogs, on Pinterest and, in social media in general, just did not mirror me. Mm-hmm. I didn't see myself in any of those images.
Yeah.
And I remember going on Pinterest and looking for women that looked like me. And I had to type in Black style, Black hair. I had to always use the word Black before images of me showed up instead of just like typing in the thing I was looking for and seeing a variety of different people. And I was only seeing white women. I just looked at a coworker one day and I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it. I'm just going to start a blog myself because there's got to be other women out there looking for these images and wanting to see themselves.
Yeah.
You were the only one that I would come across, constantly. And I'm like, finally, someone who looks, closer to what I see myself as.
Right.
I just started one. So yes, it was definitely a side hustle, but I just felt the need to do it.
I love that because that's such an organic way to get into it as well. I mean, it's unfortunate the circumstance of why you had to get into it or you felt the need to get into it. But I love that you kind of took that initiative and was like, hey, if it's not out there, I'm going to create it for myself.
Yeah. Then I realized how much time it took though. And then I, like you said, I am a full-time producer. And when you say full-time, it's like 18-hour days easily. That's like a short day. And I realized I couldn't manage both. So I kept the day job.
Yeah.
the real job.
That's smart. Yeah, I think a lot of times people underestimate how much time goes into blogging or being a quote unquote influencer or being a full-time blogger because, you think, oh, you're just getting dressed and taking pictures of yourself. But it's like, no, it's like so much more. It's like maintaining an actual blog, at least back in the day it was. Mm-hmm. And collaborations and outfits and working with photographers or if you're your own photographer and editing and this and that and the other. So yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah.
Especially if you have a full-time job.
Yes, definitely. I also just didn't find the world to be as friendly as I expected. I don't know what I expected, to be honest, but it just wasn't as nice to me as I had hoped. Oh. And I was like, okay, I don't need this. We're going to just leave that there. And
yeah. Well, it's funny you say that because last week's episode was with JC Dupree, who you know JC.
We've met a couple times, yeah.
We've met a couple of times. Mm-hmm. And, she's a huge blogger and has been for a while. And we kind of touched on the fact that we loved working together because we actually liked each other.
Right.
And it was like, it's funny, blogging. And again, I haven't done it full time in about, 2 or 3 years. So I don't know the state of it now.
Yeah.
But definitely in the beginning, especially, it was very cliquey and high schooly, and there were mean girls, and people were like, sorry, you can't talk to us if you don't have X amount of followers.
Absolutely.
And it was so ridiculous.
Yes. I felt that too. I felt the cliquey side of it, and I felt that I did not belong. It was, I didn't feel like I was cool enough to be in with the rest of the bloggers. And I was like, it wasn't a welcoming environment for me. And, it's interesting because the reason I started it was because there wasn't enough representation. And then I realized as I was going through it, it almost felt like everyone was okay with that. It was like, we don't need you here.
Well, yeah, let's unpack that a little bit.
Dig in.
Especially now. I mean, that's what everyone's talking about now with the Black Lives Matter movement, how so many brands were being called out for never using models of color, influencers of color,
Right.
Black models, Black influencers. And it's so funny because this is not new. Yeah, this has been going on forever. I mean, I was always the token in any campaign. I was always the one girl who had any kind of melanin. And so I totally get that. I hated going to blogger events because I always felt kind of like exactly what you're saying. I didn't feel, it wasn't even so much not cool enough. I felt like I just don't belong here.
Yeah.
And I don't know if at the time I thought of it as like, oh, these women don't look like me, but it was more like these women care about things that I don't care about. Like it was very surfacey and it was very fake and it was very like, oh, hi, and like pretending like I was just like, can we stop it right now? And like looking around like who's here that has more followers or something. I love that this is turning into the most gossipy thing about bloggers, but it's great because it's like inside baseball right now. Like
it is,
I lived it for 8 years and it was a lot and I had to find my peace with it because for a good amount of time I was making a great living from it and I'm very thankful for that.
Right.
And I did meet some great people, but overall it was so funny to be like in these situations where you're like at a party, free food, free booze, free stuff.
Yeah.
You know, you were probably dressed to you have a great outfit that you got for free. And it's like you're living this like life as if you are some kind of celebrity, which you're not. And then I would just be there and be like, ugh, when can I go home?
Exactly.
When do I get to leave? Did I take enough pictures
goodness.
now? Can I go home now? But I think a big part of that is exactly what you're saying, this feeling of not belonging. And in your case, you're saying not cool enough, which I want to definitely talk more about and how you felt not cool enough.
It's a combination of things because you touched on it with the followers. My following is 6,000 people, which is nothing, right, in that world. But my following is with me because they like my work as a producer. Or they like my style or whatever it is, but it's generally because they're appreciative of the actual work that I do as a producer. So for me, I would much rather have that authentic following, not get invited to the parties or have the collaborations, whatever it is. But it always felt like walking into those rooms, it was almost like you had to wear your following as a badge.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, so you're basically nobody. Like, oh, let me look you up. And, oh, I don't have to talk to her. I can move on.
Oh, God.
And it's so silly. You're right. It's Mean Girls.
And it's so icky and but it's so true. It just is exactly what it was for so long and maybe still is. But
I hope it's changing. I really do.
Yeah.
It just felt like, I say not cool enough. I just remember not feeling skinny enough, not feeling white enough, not feeling rich enough. It's this whole thing because to be a blogger, you've got to invest in that first, for the most part. A lot of those women are very, very wealthy. I just am a hard worker. None of those things were as important to me as I understood later that they needed to be in order to be in that world. Yeah, I just didn't feel welcome or comfortable. It's unfortunate because I went into it wanting to make other women of color feel welcome and comfortable by seeing someone who looks like them.
Right.
And so I kind of just gave up on it.
Oh my God. Okay. So I love where this went to, because normally I start each conversation with learning a little bit more about your upbringing, which I want to get into now, and then we can come back to the blogging stuff. Tell me a little bit about Christy Hooks and where she grew up and what her childhood was like.
I am an LA native. Born and raised.
That's a rare thing.
I know, right? I was born at Cedars, and I live about 10 minutes away from that now. So just kind of stayed around. I grew up in kind of an industry family, I guess. My grandfather was one of the first African-American men to be a lead in a television show, and he was Trouble Man. I don't know.
Oh
You're too young to remember Trouble Man, but maybe someone else does. And my father went to work with him and found a love for the business as well. And he was an actor at age 9. And he was in the movie Sounder, and he was in a show called The White Shadow when he was about 19. So my mother and father moved out here where the show was shot in LA and had me.
Aww.
And I then grew up going to set with my father, which I think you've seen photos of at this point.
I have, and they're so freaking adorable.
It's pretty funny. So I grew up going to set with him, and immediately I knew that I wanted to be a part of this business. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I wanted to learn everything. So I would sit on set with him. Summer break, it would be 4 a.m. He would come in and be on his way to set. And I would be like, just wait a second. I want to come with you. And I would go and sit with him all day. And people would be like, is she bored? I wasn't, ever.
That's amazing. And wait, how old were you when this was around? How old were you?
The earliest I remember doing it was around 7, I think.
Wow.
Yeah. And I would always want to be on set with him. And that never changed. You know, he just retired in January, which, my God, was perfect timing.
Right.
And I was on the set with him for his last day. I mean, I'm still going to try to pull him back into the business just so I can sit and watch him direct again. But his whole career, I've always been interested. I then went to a creative arts school for high school. I went to Crossroads High School in Santa Monica and took theater and dance and film and just did all the things. And I went to Pepperdine for college, which did not have a film program, but they had communications and production. So I took that. And 3 days after graduating, I started at Stephen Bochco Production and took off from there.
Wow. So it was pretty clear. So that's so rare. I feel like that people who like someone knowing from such a young age what they want to do and kind of following through with it. Because I feel like when I was younger, like I wanted to be a lawyer, then I wanted to be an astronaut, then I wanted to be a business person, then I wanted to be a journalist. And now, I mean, maybe that's just me because I also change my careers every 5 years. But I think that's so cool that you knew at such a young age because of your father and grandfather that you wanted to work in this business, and you are working in this business. And I also think it's interesting, while you said you took acting classes, did you ever pursue acting? Because I feel like that's the lane that most people go to.
Sure. No, I didn't. I was interested in it only in school. When I realized how unstable it was, to be honest, I kind of I was like, you know what? I think I'll be okay behind the camera. Which,
Smart.
Can also be unstable, but it turns out it was the right path for me. And I do also enjoy acting and would love to do it if it sort of came easily, I guess, which it doesn't. So,
Well, it takes a lot of practice and classes.
Yeah. So I kind of I was happy behind the camera.
That's great. So in your childhood, tell me more about like school. So Crossroads, I feel like it's known in LA for being like a really great school. And it's in Santa Monica. What was that like as far as the student body and being like a young Black girl? Were you one of few, or were there many, or how did it work?
No, I was definitely one of few. There was only a handful of people of color in the school. it was very interesting in a predominantly white environment. Always, by the way, I went to all of my schools, even kindergarten. I recall photos. I'm one of 2 Black girls in the school. So from preschool all the way through my work life, I'm in predominantly white spaces.
Right.
High school was interesting because I did feel not white enough. I was, I had a ton of friends. I was, I hate to say, but in the popular group, whatever. The school was so small. It was like we couldn't even have groups. Just everyone was good friends. But yeah, I had a lot of people around me. We had a lot of fun together. But I did always have this thing deep inside that I felt like I didn't belong once again because my hair was different.
Yeah.
Everyone around me was a tall, skinny white girl, and I'm this thick Black girl.
Yeah.
I had experiences where people would, like younger kids would come to me and say, "Why is your skin so dirty?"
Oh my God.
And at first I was like, "What?" I didn't have PE today. What are you talking about? Why am I dirty?
Yeah.
And then I realized, they just mean, why is my skin darker? But to them, it's dirty. My response to that was, you should probably go home and ask your mother to explain it to you. I don't know why you've never seen a Black person before, but...
Did you actually say that to
I did. I did. I just said, my skin is not dirty. I think that you should go home and ask your mom what different skin looks like.
Wow. How old were you, Christy, when this happened?
I was in junior high school.
Jesus.
Yeah, I was in the
They're not even that young.
Right. Exactly. The kid was younger. I will say that. The kid was younger. He was probably 3rd grade?
Yeah, but still, how old are you in 3rd grade? 8?
Right.
9? Like, this sounds like something like maybe like a 2 or 3-year-old who's never been around anyone.
Exactly.
Would say, Jesus, okay, tell me more.
Yeah, so I definitely always felt like different. There's always microaggressions that come my way. Can I touch your hair? Why is it so different? Why is it so rough? Why don't you wash it every day? Things like that, where it's like I constantly have to explain why I'm different.
Yeah.
And so it made high school, again, I had a great time in high school. I'm not going to say I didn't, but it just throws insecurity in there where it doesn't. It's like we don't need more insecurity in high school.
Right.
But I also had nowhere really to go to talk about that.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, how did you deal with this kind of stuff? And if there was anyone that you did have as a confidant? For the most part, I held it in. And I didn't know how to process it, so I just ignored it. And then, I had my 1 or 2 Black friends in the school, and we would sort of talk about it, but I think, to be honest, she was also holding it in, and we would just sort of move on from it and try to talk about anything else. If I could go back to talk to my high school self, I would never allow that. Right. Looking back as an adult, you have to have a safe space and you have to have someone to be able to open up to. Yeah. My therapy sessions are helping me at this point. But Right. So you're getting these, questions or microaggressions. Mm-hmm. How are you dealing with them as far as like day to day? Like, are you trying to quote unquote be more white? Are you like doing your hair a certain way? Or are you thinking, even though you're keeping it to yourself, do you know at that age, like, no, I know I'm beautiful. I know it's okay to be Black. It's more than okay to be Black. How are you actually dealing with it day to day? Yes, I would say, trying to fit in. I won't say I was trying to be white, but I was trying to fit in. And maybe in doing so, I would, straighten the hair. I had a moment where I had an eating disorder because I just wanted to be as skinny and, my curves were naturally there, but I didn't understand why. Right. So I would go through different phases of trying to fit in and trying different ways to go about that. Maybe now looking back on it, I realize I kind of was trying to be white, but that's because that's what was offered to me. It was the only thing I saw around me. Even in
magazines, in the culture, everything I saw, and, I'm sure you can agree with this, everything we were fed was white is beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I remember I was super into Barbies and Cabbage Patch dolls.
Yep.
I remember and it's so funny because now in retrospect, I'm like, oh, it makes me so sad to think that as a child, and I think I was very young, I think I was like 5 or 6, not wanting the black Barbie or the black Cabbage Patch doll because thinking that it wasn't as good as the white ones. And how fucked up that is, because that's just like fed to us.
It's terrible. The only reason I wanted the black Barbie is because her name was Christy.
Oh.
And so
I didn't know that.
Yeah, the black Barbie is Christy, and it was spelled the same way and everything. And I was like, oh, it's me. I mean, it was the first time I saw something and I was like, it's me. Finally, there's something that, represents who I am. I'll say I had one black Barbie and 50 white Barbies. So
Right. No, same. And I remember also feeling, because my skin is more, I would say, medium brown. And I remember the dolls being so much darker than me. So even the black dolls feeling like they weren't like my color.
There's no Gracie doll.
There's no Gracie doll. There's definitely no Gracie doll. And there's definitely not one spelled with an S.
Exactly.
And so, that's just constantly fed to us. And I also think that's why I loved TV so much, because ironically, back in the 80s and 90s, I feel like there were a lot of black families on television. There were a lot of shows that were black centric. And so I remember loving like Different Strokes, and I remember loving What's Happening, and I remember loving, The Cosby Show, and all these shows that had women, girls that looked like me. And how cool that was.
And then it just went away. It was after UPN. I think UPN and WB merged or something like that. And all of the black shows were on UPN, and they just dropped every single one of them.
Oh my God. Yeah, that's crazy. I didn't know that about the UPN thing. That does make sense.
Yeah. Everything just dropped. And then there was a drought until, sadly, not too long ago.
Yeah, recently. Okay, so this is your pretty young experience, and then you're saying high school kind of carried over. It was a similar experience because you are being raised in Los Angeles in like more, I would say, affluent areas. It sounds like where maybe there weren't as many students of color around.
Right.
And LA, I think in general, is super segregated.
It really is. It really is.
Yeah, it kind of blew my mind because I'm from New York, and New York can have definitely like neighborhoods where certain ethnic groups reside the most.
Sure.
But at the same time, in New York, because you're not driving, because you're always walking around and you're on a subway, you're constantly around a huge variety of people from this to that and everything in between. Whereas in LA, because you're in your car and you're driving from neighborhood to neighborhood, it really does feel very segregated.
It does. And there's far less interaction. And I felt that growing up. I kind of had to seek out, and I didn't in high school, I won't lie. I had to seek out people who looked like me. And in my adult life, I figured out kind of how to do that a little bit better. But in high school, it's like, for the most part, you're doing what your parents tell you. It's like you drive to school, you drive home, you can go to a party every once in a while, but you're with your people, you're with your high school friends. So later in life is when I could find a group that had a variety of people in it, I guess.
Okay. So now throughout this whole childhood and high school, getting back to the theme of the podcast, Not Blank Enough, what was the blank that you felt the most, you would say?
Not white enough.
Not white enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not white enough, not pretty enough. But that's because I wasn't white.
Right. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
That thinking like it had nothing to do, I think I felt that way too as a kid. It had nothing to do with actual quote unquote prettiness, but more to do with I don't look like what I'm being told is pretty.
Exactly.
I hate that. I think it's changing. I hope it's changing.
Yeah.
But it really makes me sad because I feel like women of our generation and earlier, but especially our generation, I don't know what it is about our generation, but there really was that feeling of not belonging because you're not the pretty white girl that everyone talks about and admires.
Right. I can't tell you how many times I got, "You're so pretty for a black girl," or
Ugh.
"You're the prettiest black girl I've seen." It's like, well, you know, if you could only hear yourself, you know, it's like, and I feel like in this moment in time we're having, hopefully more of a movement in time, I hope that a lot of these people reflect back on those things and realize that they're not okay. You know, I would always get "We like you because you're just like us," or "You're not black. What?
Oh, God.
And I wish I had the courage to confront that then. Instead, I would just kind of laugh it off and be uncomfortable with it. Mm-hmm. I mean, of course, now I'd hop right on all of that. And
Right,
like,
right.
But I didn't have the courage because it was me, you know, one person against the cool group of all white girls.
And like, school is hard enough. Like
Yeah.
you said earlier, it's like, it's hard enough just getting through school and being around kids because we are all little assholes when we're kids. We're in high school and junior high school. And honestly, like, I don't know. It's interesting. I've been exploring my high school a lot lately as well, my high school experience. And I actually had a pretty diverse high school experience. Like, I think grade school or like, you know, kindergarten to ninth grade was predominantly white, but there were some of us who were either Black or Latin or Asian. But then when I went to high school, I actually was in a predominantly Latin high school. Like it was an all-girls Catholic high school. And I would say like 90% of us were Latin.
Oh, wow.
Latinos, or now we say Latinx. But back then we were saying Latinos.
Yes.
Or Latinas because we're all girls.
Right.
Even within that, even within this environment of being around all these women of color, I was still one of the few Afro-Latinas. So I was still one of the few dark ones who had the, you know, curly kinky hair, who I like relaxed it and blew it out all the time and stuff. And so even within that, and it's the same thing. It's like even these women of color are trying to make themselves more white, even though sometimes their skin is white.
Yes.
They're trying to make themselves more like Anglo-white to feel pretty. And anything that's not that is not pretty.
Well, I definitely felt that as well. And, you know, that this feeling still lingers with me because there was always, you know, we're talking about tokenism here. There's always the token person of color, right? Mm-hmm. If they decide to, as an actress, I know that you have felt this, but if they decide to go with a black girl for a role, she's got to be light skinned. She's got to have the long curly hair, you know, all of these things that, again, were not me.
Right.
So even if I was seeing an image of a black woman in a show or a magazine or whatever it is, it still made me feel not pretty enough because I was darker, my hair was kinkier, I was thicker, all of these things. And it was like, if there's no representation for what everyone looks like, and if there's no
example of
if there's no example of the fact that everybody can be beautiful no matter what shade you are,
right,
then we're not going to feel that.
Right, which is why representation is so important, and we're starting to finally lean towards that, or get I think people are starting to be more aware of what it means. Like, you can't just place one black girl in something and say, hey, look, we have representation, because that one black girl represents that one kind of black girl, or that one looking black girl. It's like we come in so many shades and so many hair types and so many looks. And it's just like, why can you have a campaign with a blonde girl and a redhead and a brunette and a blue-eyed girl and a brown, and that's fine. Right. Just have the one black girl, almost white black girl,
right? And
say, hey, look, we have one.
Yeah, exactly.
Crazy. Okay, so this feeling of not white enough, and I totally get that, because that is your surrounding, that is the time. You know, you're not being told what you look like is beautiful. You're being told that this other thing is beautiful. But now you're an adult and you get to surround yourself with the people you want to surround yourself with.
Yes.
And you work in production. You're a producer. You're a kick-ass producer. What is Christy like now? Like, what is your blank now? Has it shifted? What has it shifted to? And how are you feeling now about it all?
I carried the not white enough into my career a little bit, just because, you know, production is also a very white space. As a black woman who looks younger than she is,
Yes, she does.
Thankfully. Thanks, mom and dad. But, you know, that can actually work against you in your career, because I walk in and I'm the department head, I'm the boss, and no one knows it and no one believes it. Even though I had the experience to back it, I still always felt not experienced enough, because that's what people were putting on me. Not because it was true, but because I would walk in the room and people would speak to, you know, I have a male second. I'm the department head. He's the supervisor, and he's like my brother and one of my best friends. But so we do everything together, but we walk into an office or a meeting and people immediately think he's the boss.
Right. Well, he's white, he's a male, and he looks older.
He is black.
Oh, he's black.
Yes.
But just because he's a male and he looks older.
Yes. No, he doesn't even look older, by the way.
Oh my God. So this is just sexism.
Totally, right. But you know, and this is just him, but I've had several occasions, yes, with white men. If I walk into a room with a white man, forget it. Of course they're going to think he's the boss.
Right.
Or anyone else, to be honest. Anyone other than a black woman. I think the first time I felt empowered in my position was when I went to work with Ava DuVernay, because she surrounds herself and her company, you know, hires people of color and women, and it creates an environment where there's no feeling of not good enough there.
Right.
Because you're surrounded. Right. Because you're surrounded by people who look like you and everyone is going through a similar thing.
And then the boss is a female black woman. And
Exactly.
So people are like, oh, okay. It's a little different here.
So that was a major transition for me. And I kind of learned a lot and came out of that feeling owning my boss, I guess I'll say. Whereas I would feel not experienced enough coming into a meeting, even though I had that experience. I now walk in and I'm like, no, I got this. It's, I remember, and I'm going to butcher this, so I'm not even going to try. I'm just going to paraphrase. But I remember Michelle Obama saying, I think she was talking to Oprah when she said that she, you know, now that she has a seat at the table, I think Oprah asked her, how did you feel sitting with all of these men? And she was like, well, yeah, once you realize they're not at all smarter than you, you're fine. And I heard her say that and I was like, you know what? That's true. And I don't think I'm walking into any room with less experience than these men, or, you know, the experience may be different, but I don't have to feel less than.
Yeah. And that's such a great example of, I mean, we keep going back to it, but why representation matters. Because before this experience, the people you worked with who were the bosses probably didn't look like you. Right. And then you go into an experience where the people who are your bosses do look like you, or the people that you're working with and who are in charge do look like you. So then in turn, you feel like, oh, I can do that because here is an example of that.
I think for me, watching my father as a director my whole life, I never questioned that a black man could be a director. You know, that was a given for me. But I had never seen a black woman do it. And I'll never forget the day I was on set with Ava. It was day one of Queen Sugar, and we were shooting. And I pulled her aside and I said, and she knows my father very well. And I said, I have always seen a black man do this, but I want you to know this is the very first time I've ever seen a black woman do it. And that opened things up for me. I had been, at that point, I had been in this industry and around this industry my whole life. I had been in it for at least 10 years at that point, maybe 15. But, you know, I had seen it my whole life. And the fact that I had never seen a black woman direct anything.
That's crazy.
Is crazy.
I mean, that is such a freaking fantastic example of it. Like, you as a black woman growing up in basically a Hollywood black family and seeing it happen, but also only seeing it with men. That's crazy. Like to have to, oh my God, I'm sorry. I'm like choked up right now. I get chills a lot on this show. Like when I'm having interviews and I'm like, I just got chills of you saying that to Ava, because it's just like, it's so beautiful and also like so fucked up. I'm like, God, a woman, a black woman who's been on set her whole life watching her Black father be a director and still never saw the female version of it. Never saw yourself in it because it wasn't a woman. And that's like crazy to me.
It's insane. And I'm wondering if, I mean, because as you know, I'm just now starting to explore with directing. And, you know, it's always been something I've wanted to do, but I don't know that I felt that I was allowed. I know that sounds crazy to say. Of course I am, of course. But I just don't know. I think seeing her do that and being in an environment where there are all female directors for Queen Sugar. And most of them are Black. So I think that just busted the door wide open for me. And I was like, oh, wait a minute. Hold on.
Yeah.
They're doing it. I can also do it. And, you know, let me get on it. What am I waiting for?
Yeah, and it doesn't seem crazy at all. That seems 100% on point. And that's why it feels hopeful that I think this new generation of young girls, young Black girls, young girls of color can have a different experience, hopefully, and see, like, from a very young age that they can literally do anything because now there are examples of that, whereas we didn't have those examples.
That's right.
Oh, so good. Well, I love everything we talked about, from the blogging gossip to your upbringing to today and Black Hollywood. I love it all. Is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, I would love to say that, you know, we now have a Black woman and an Asian woman who is on her way to the White House.
Yes, please, Lord.
What?
Please.
I hope. I just can't pray enough. Like,
seriously.
But, you know, this is a time where young Black women get to see something none of us have ever witnessed before. And the only thing I want to leave with is please vote.
Yes. Yes. Vote, vote, vote.
Vote.
Get out there, you know, mail in the ballot or drop the ballot off at a polling station. There's so many ways to do it. Figure it out. Please get it done. Oh, yes. That is a great way to leave us. Thank you so much, Christy.
Thank you. I always love talking to you.
I love talking to you.
Our conversations
I know.
can go on forever.
And I love you. Thank you.
I love you too.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Not Blank Enough. Please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. And follow us on Instagram at Not Blank Enough Pod. Until next time, thank you for listening. Check the show notes for links and info about today's guest. This episode was produced during the COVID-19 pandemic of 2020 and recorded remotely. Our show today was produced by Gracie Mercedes and Dave Hill and edited by Douglas Sarine and Colleen Beasley. Not Blank Enough is a Gumption Pictures production.